Hi guys, my name is Just Shay and I am the host of Matters of Black, and today we are here at Sims Poetry Library and I'm here with the owner, Hiram. Nice to meet you, Hiram.
Good to meet you too, Lachelle.
So I heard that this is the only poetry library on the West Coast. Is that correct?
That is correct. That is
And
correct.
then how did we get, what came about you even wanting to own a poetry library? Give me the history.
Yeah. So what had happened was I had a class that I was teaching. It was a community class called the Community Literature Initiative, and they're poetry classes for people from the neighborhood who want to finish and publish books. And so USC gave me some free classroom space. And so I recruited students from the neighborhood to take those classes. And so during year 4 of that class, I started making it mandatory for students to read a book of poetry every week. And so I wanted to do that because I felt like it would give them a chance to see some of the literary traditions that happen in the books, and that if they read enough poetry books, they would have a clear vision of the book that they wanted to create. What transpired is, after 2 weeks of making them do that, I realized that my students were not doing it. Like they were not reading
Really,
a book
poetry
every week. And so I asked them why, and they said, we can't find poetry books. And so they're harder to find than you think. And so I was like, go to the library. And then they were like, we went to the library and they're not there. And so I went to the library that was literally across the street from the classroom. For the poetry section, they were like, there is no poetry section,
Wow.
So so I realized that there was like a void there and a need for, the students to have books. And so what I did was I went to Ross and I bought a suitcase for $29.99. And I took 100 of my own books and I put them in the suitcase and I drug it to class every Monday night. And so the students would check out a book from my suitcase and, put one back from the week before. And one of my students said, oh, this is the little Sims library of poetry right here.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, da-da-da! Right? You start to see the whole vision. And so it was like a seed, that he planted. And so a couple of years later, I was tinkering around with just like scrap wood in my backyard. And so I learned, I took that scrap wood and I built a bookshelf, that was about maybe 4 feet high, 3 feet wide. And then I looked at my garage and I was like, you know what? I bet you I can build like a wraparound bookshelf, maybe I'll, invite people from the community to, to come and read books. And so, and I was like, I'll start the library of poetry here in my garage. And so my brother came over, we built the bookshelves. And so when I took my 100 books off the shelf and I put them on those shelves, it looked like I only had maybe like 5 books because the shelves are so big, right? And so I called every poet I knew. I was like, I'm having a birthday party, and we're going to open the library of poetry in my garage. And so all these poets came with boxes and crates of books.
Oh, wow.
And so we built a stage, we had a poetry performance, and then people just left their box on the counter. And so at the beginning of the day, we had my 300 books. At the end of that day, we had 2,000 books of poetry.
I think when you have 1,000, I believe you can register your books as a library. It's like that's the minimum, 1,000 books.
Yeah.
Wow.
And so, but it was really incredible what happened that day because it really taught me that you could just build a library from people putting their own little collections together. Right? And I know it was hard for some of those poets to part with their books, but they know, okay, at least if they go to this library, people can still visit them,
Right.
And of course use them. But having the library in a garage poses some challenges. One of the challenges is, the owner of the house lived next door. So when she found out it was a library in the garage, she was like, "Oh snap, it's about to be homeless people kicking it in the garage." And I told her, like, don't worry about that. But also, like, in my garage there's no bathroom. So people got to come in the house.
Use
And my
restroom.
wife was like, "Who is this coming in the?" But so I knew that eventually we wanted to move to an actual public space, but that's what we had, so we just started where we could start. And so like maybe 1 year later, the pandemic happened, and my wife actually had a preschool here, and the pandemic shut down the preschool, and she had wanted to close it anyway. So she told me, like, "Hey, do you want to move your library from the garage into this space, and you could just take over the bills and then just do that." So that's what we did. On January 10th, 2021 is when we moved from the garage to this place. And me and my brother, we built all these bookshelves.
I
And,
mean, it's amazing. It looks good, and it seemed like since the last time I was here, you've got more books.
yeah, and I
So-
think right now we got around 9,000 books of poetry.
Yeah,
here
so
in
you're
the
going to
library.
outgrow this space eventually.
Yes.
I mean, that's always good.
Yeah.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
So okay, I have a question for you, because
Okay.
this season is Black Author Edition.
Oh,
So Black
nice.
Author Edition, that umbrella falls under like publishing, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So as you having a poetry library, do you also dabble in writing poetry yourself?
Absolutely, yeah. I'm a poet. I'm also a poetry professor, and one of our mantras in CLI is to read every day, write every day, and so it's something that I lead the students in doing. We have a virtual writing session every morning called Writer's Block from 8 to 9:30, and I just open up the Zoom room and all these students come and we write together. We all say good morning and then hit the mute button, and then we all just
go in.
yeah.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so to me, that's really like the blueprint of how these books get written. To me, books are made out of time. And if you carve time out of your day to dedicate to your writing, then you just make some progress on the goal every single day.
So as a writer, what is your ultimate goal as a writer?
I think, I have several. One of the goals is just to get it out, and to me, that was the greatest blessing in being able to write every day, is that the pace at which new ideas come in matches the pace at which I'm able to get them out.
You know what? I'm going to take that. That's really good, because for me as a writer, and I do more visual,
Okay.
I'm more screenplay, that kind of writer,
Okay,
whatever.
cool.
But it's so much.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't keep up with it. But if I'm disciplined enough, I need to take the time out to sit down and to just put it out there, at least on paper. you know?
Yeah. And, I was inspired by Ray Bradbury, who also wrote some screenplays, but he also wrote novels. He also, he wrote everything. But to him, what happened to him is he was probably 11 years old, and he went to a circus, and he went to a tent called Electroman, and then Electroman he had an electrified sword, and he put it on Ray Bradbury's nose, and his hair stood up on his head, and so he said, "Live forever, live forever," and then Ray Bradbury went home, and he was like, "How do I live forever?" And then the next morning he was like, "Got it, I'll be a writer." Like, that's how I
Yeah.
live forever. And so
Oh, wow.
he went to the library, and then He read a page and wrote a page every day for the rest of his life for 75 years. And because of that, he wrote like 10,000 short stories, novels, plays, poetry, everything. But I think like just giving yourself that time, like that's, and the inspiration just keeps coming. And if you keep letting it pass through you, then you can create magic over and over again.
Okay, so shifting gears. As a black writer, what do you think some of the challenges are being a black writer and getting your work published?
That's a good question. I think the challenge is finding publishers that want to publish black writers. And I think the best way to do that is to look for black publications and then find out who published them. Right? So to me, like one of the shining stars of black publications is like Alfred Knopf. And so Alfred Knopf published Langston Hughes, and that was his first black writer. And then they published a bunch of them. Like they published Angela Davis, like eventually, like they published Toni Morrison. They published, like this like long history of black writers. And so there are other ones, that exist. And then if you think about Dudley Randall, so many black people have created publishing companies. Like Dudley Randall created Broadside Press, and he was only focused on publishing black poets. And he was based in Detroit. Broadside Press still exists today. So to me, black writers should be looking for, publishers who want to publish, or maybe I should say are willing, to publish black writers, because some of them have a more general focus, and some of them are like black writers only, so. In any case, my first book was published by Figueroa Press, which is owned by USC, and they weren't focused on black writers, but they were willing, to publish black writers. So I think the question is, like who's down to publish our work and share our stories.
Okay, so last question for us. Okay, how did your publishing company come about?
So, World Stage Press came out of the Anansi Writers Workshop, which happens at the World Stage. And that particular workshop is actually 30 years old. And it was created by Kamal Daoud, who's this world-traveled poet who performs with jazz bands. And then Billy Higgins, who's like the most recorded jazz drummer in music history or the history of jazz. So the World Stage began as a repository for black art, and so many black artists of various kinds perform there and like work out their stuff. And so they have drumming there, singing there, jazz bands play there, but every Wednesday night is the poetry night, and that's when Anansi happens. And so I was going there every Wednesday for about 2 years, and I met Connie Williams, who was the host of the show, but he was also the artistic director of the World Stage. And we had completed year 1 of CLI. So we had like 12 authors, or maybe 11, who had finished their books but needed to like connect with a publisher. And so there were so many incredible black poets at the World Stage, and the format of their workshop is, first there is a 30-minute workshop where people bring pages, read the poem, and people do line edits. Then there's a 30-minute feature, then there's an open mic. Right? And so, so all these incredible poets were performing, but none of them had books. And I came out of grad school having learned how books are made. So I learned everything about book production, how to do editing, how to do cover design, how to do layout design, proofing. And so that was really, in my opinion, like a marriage of sorts. You know, like you had these incredible, talented poets that were all coming to this historic space, and then I kind of brought the ability and knowledge of like book making to that. So they already had the material,
They
like
just need to put it
they
in
just
book
didn't
form.
know, yeah, how to make books. And so Connie was like, always, we were outside one night. He's like, I always want to start a press. And I'm like, what would you call it? And he was like, World Stage Press, you know, like, and I was like, let's do that, you know, like, so every Wednesday from 12 to noon, me and Nadia, who was uh, the press manager at the time, we would go in there and we would make books. And so World Stage Press has grown though so rapidly. Now we publish one book a month.
Wow.
So we publish 12 books a year. 90% of it is poetry, but we also publish children's books and a few like short story collections. But you know, we call it community publishing because, you know, what we're endeavoring to create is culturally relevant literature. So literature that is literally coming out of the neighborhood, that is about the neighborhood, you know, like so that people can read a book that has the word Crenshaw in it, Adams, Normandy,
Right.
Hoover, you know,
Right.
Degnan. And so,
We used to live on Hoover.
okay, okay. So so World Stage Press, now it went from like just me and Nadia working 2 hours a week to now there's like a 7-person staff,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
that's working on World Stage Press, endeavoring to, you know, like create, share, publish, and distribute poetry books. You know, like the mission of World Stage Press is the creation and proliferation of African American literature. So creation means that we actually invented, you know, like we can make literature.
Right.
And then proliferation means that we want to spread it, you know, like get it into as many hands and eyes and ears as we possibly can. You know, but and to me, like the focus on African American literature is also celebrating like the whole canon of black writers, right? Starting with like Jupiter Hammond, who was the first black person to publish a book in what later became the United States in 1761. He was the first person to publish a poem.
Wow.
And then, you know, Phyllis Wheatley came after him in 1773. And then, of course, like, then you have a large collection of slave narratives from Frederick Douglass and, you know, Booker T. Washington. And then you got, you know, Du Bois. And so we literally publish all of that. You know, like we publish all the books that are in the public domain. But, you know, so we try to cover the span from 1761 to like last month. You know, like like that whole stretch, you know, of black literature. My name is Hiram Sims, and this poem is called Throwing Up the Deuces. I believe in hands, human tentacles reaching for each other in the light and the dark. I believe in shaking hands, strangers being introduced to strangers, touching as a sign of respect. I believe that the 3 lines in your palm are proof that God has sewn you together out of fat back and no slack, out of get down and act right, out of balled up fists and open palms. I believe in wedding rings and class rings, 44 karat gold and plastic rings out the gumball machine. I believe in ring pops from the ice cream truck and 20-minute marriages on the monkey bars that lasted until the candy was all gone. I believe in black fists raised at Black Lives Matter rallies. I believe in season fries passed to me through car windows at rallies, his hand to my hand. I believe in DAP, give me 5 on the black hand side. I believe in putting that hand up when the car behind you lets you in their lane. I believe in hands clapping at graduations as family members walk across the stage, cap and gowns in tow while we head to Red Lobster to celebrate, or maybe Auntie's backyard for spaghetti and garlic bread if we struggle in that month. I believe in waving goodbye, throwing up the deuces until we meet again. I believe in two hands pushed together in prayer, sometimes folded, sometimes held out open, asking and asking and asking. I believe in hands writing new chapters for new books yet written. I believe in hands pointing the way to a new destination. I believe in hands.
Thank you so much, Hiram, for giving us some amazing poetry.
You're welcome.
And we hope to see you later in the season. So tell our people where they can find you on social media.
You can find me on Instagram at Hiram Sims, on Facebook at Hiram Sims, and you could also find the Sims Library of Poetry at Sims Library of Poetry. And then on Facebook, we are Sims Library of Poetry.
Let's discuss open mic you have here.
Yeah, so every third Saturday of the month, we have an open mic called Pages on Stages. It's usually at 6 p.m. The address is 2702 West Florence, Los Angeles, California, 90043. And anybody from the community can come get on the mic, so please come join us.
Come get on the mic. Come join us. We love y'all. Thank you for tuning in to Matters of Black. Catch y'all next week. Bye.